Sawadee krap. Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I actually have been here for quite a while. I'm thinking I'm almost an annual moderator here. But the one great thing for today is actually quite a full house. So it's great to be away far from COVID and seeing everybody's faces warm and welcomed. A little bit after lunch, hope you guys are not sleepy. We have a great session today. We'll be talking about payments and how things are innovating, how things will be going forward in the future. We have some great distinguished panelists with us. So without further ado, let me introduce our four distinguished speakers for today. First off, from Ant Financial Group, one of the biggest financial services company, we have Dr. Sherry Huang, General Manager of Alipay Plus. Second, from Siam Commercial Bank, President and Chief Technology Officer, Kun Orapong Thein-ngern. Thirdly, from Visa, Head of Innovation, Asia Pacific, Kunal Chatterjee. Last but definitely not least, from Stripe, your financial payment technology company, Head of Expansion and Incubation globally, Krishnan Rajagopalan. Please have a seat, everybody. All right, so today's session is about payments. Today's theme and this week's theme is about AI. So we will be definitely touching upon what we see in payments, how special use cases we see using technology, using AI, we see in payments, and how we see things going forward in the next few years. I believe, I used to sit here 5 years ago talking about payments, and we were talking about, hey, how do we get cash back into digital transfers, right? And that was when, Thai people were still using ATM as the core transactional channel not too long ago, and we forget about it very quickly. But I think the industry have moved in quite quickly. Today, you can easily just walk around the whole of Thailand with just a phone. You can do transactions with a QR, with just a bank transfer, and a lot of new ways that is much more cashless. So I believe, things have moved in quite quickly, even sometimes we don't realize it. So I think that's gonna be a leeway into how we see things going forward. So I wanna jump into you first, Kunal. How do you see, from a global view, how payments is going, some of the big trends around payments that you have touched upon?
Sure. So firstly, thank you for having me here. It's a great privilege and honor to be sitting here. I started off my career in a bank branch in India and counting cash. So transition that out to Visa. It's a great sort of a journey for me personally. And from Visa's perspective, our job as a payment network is to ensure we digitize all sorts of payments, not just consumer payments, but payments that happen between governments, economies, and so on and so forth. So when you overlay that, for us to be the best way to pay and be paid by everyone everywhere, what does innovation look like? There are two essential types that we look to do based on trends. So one is something that's visible to everyone. So what I call front-end innovation, which improves customer experiences, removes friction from payments. One example I can give you is something we launched in the US as a pilot. It's called Visa Plus. That enables our network to be a bridge between PayPal, Venmo, Western Union, to move money from one wallet to another wallet. So if I have to send money to you, Kuntami, and you don't have a PayPal account, but you have Venmo, we could still do that using the Visa bridge. So that's what I call as front-end innovation. Then when you think about back-end, on how we sort of improve efficiencies in settlement networks, we recently announced stable coins as a mean of currency to settle payments for merchants who are crypto native on USDC. And that enables and drives a lot of efficiencies in terms of cross-border money movement and settlement accounts. The third big thing we're seeing right now is the whole world of embedded finance. There's about $245 billion of money to be made in Asia Pacific just on this place. Top use cases, lending, deposits. Third one is payments. And how payments is slowly and should be become absolutely ubiquitous to procurement flows. So recently, we struck a commercial arrangement with the SAP in Asia Pacific, where payments become part of the procurement user flow. So you don't have to toggle between one system to another system, but it's part of the same work process and flows. So those are some of the key areas that we're seeing sort of evolve, and even globally. Because when you think about the future, it's a quote from William Gibson, who's a very popular science fiction writer, and he said, the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So different markets, different use cases, different sets of infrastructure means that we need to have a sort of a balanced approach for us as a global company when we think about that.
No, I mean, that's a great point on embedded finance. I think a lot of us forget about a lot of the payments we do today because it's really embedded in those journeys. We order food, we take a ride, payments is behind, right? So it's embedded, which is a lever I want to jump right to Stripe, with to you, Krishnan. So how are you seeing some of these trends from your view as a really one of the biggest payment enabler and payment embedded provider on the back end of many, many companies?
Sure. First of all, thanks a lot for having me. It's an honor for sure. I think just taking a step back, I think there's a couple of pieces that we think about at Stripe a lot. Sort of the overall mission is to sort of increase the GDP of the internet. We want to try and make it super ubiquitous and easy for anyone who previously would not have been able to get on online, sell online, transact online, actually remove all the friction, right? So I think many of the themes that Kunal talked about, ubiquity, embedded, et cetera, are all foundational to how Stripe has built their product, right? So some of the key challenges, the interesting thing with payments is, right, the internet has been around for 3 decades. It's super reliable. Like, you can more or less walk the corners of the earth and get internet access these days reliably. Payments has not kept up yet, right? Like, so even today, global average is 10% of payments that should go through transactions actually fail, right? We did some work on, so it's not just working on like what I'll call the advanced use cases. I think there's still a lot of foundational work that also needs to be done. And so a lot of our sort of efforts are bifurcated into, one, increasing foundations, right? And the foundations for us have 2 or 3 different elements. The first is making it incredibly easy, sort of lowering barriers to entry so that you don't have to have a technological background. You don't need to have, a set of programmers. You shouldn't have to do anything except, right, essentially write 2 lines of code, or not even that, actually, in many cases, to be able to transact online, right? So one shape of ubiquity for us is sort of extreme convenience to our users. The second shape of it is really around optimizations, right? So there was sort of a study that we conducted where we looked at thousands of merchants and their checkout experiences and what the payment flow looks like. Turns out more than 95% of them had 5 or 6 what we call unforced errors, right? Meaning the way the merchants had implemented like their checkout experiences led to drop in payment successes, right? These are all things that actually got in the way of actually being successful, right? So we spend a lot of cycles on things like optimized checkout suites, right? So we make it super easy for us to, for consumers to be able to use essentially an embedded experience to deliver huge auth rates. On the other end of the spectrum, I think are many of the things that Kunal already shared, so I won't repeat them, but I think there's a lot of like future innovation as well that we're looking at, many of which I think is already covered.
I think I'll cover that, but I think that's a great point. Getting some of the basics right just to really get more inclusivity in the user base. And I think I'll jump into Sherry on how Ant is actually really getting to both online, offline engagement with both buyers, sellers, and kind of the bigger ecosystem and economy as a whole.
Again, thank you for having me here. It's a great honor. So I like what you shared before. So I think there are a few keywords: inclusive, interoperability, and simplicity. I think this is where the digital payment has to go. Ant was the aim of Ant actually is build up a platform, an ecosystem to support the whole global business to go digital. In the last 20 years ago, we established Alipay, which is a business actually to build trust between the merchants and the users. And we see a few key trends after this COVID. One of the things is we see in the emerging markets, the QR code payment grows very fast. But however, the inclusivity, especially to the unbanked populations and SMEs, is something we have to be considered. The second part, they talk about interoperability. I think one of the things we realize, the regional and the globally development is very uneven, such as in China and in the Southeast Asia, developed definitely QR code. But Europe is open banking, and came to US, it's still very much card-based. So from this, how we make sure that in the regional levels, we can do the interoperability. This is the second thing we need to work on. The third, definitely SME. When we talk about digitalizations, which SME, again, 90% of economy rely on the SMEs. If we are bring the economy to digital, we have to work on that. So on the end, we actually trying to work on these three, but we believe that we definitely have to work with everyone together to build an ecosystem for this. For the first, we call it inclusive. So we have been empower a lot of the wallet, number of wallets across the region for that. So one of the things with True Money, for instance, so we're very glad next week we're going to have an event to help True Money user to using in China. So we have been using for a number of the places, and we're going to announce this. This is one of the things we want to be more inclusive. The second part, interoperability. So we introduced the Alipay Plus services. From this, we are trying to not only bridging amongst Southeast Asian countries, but also globally to make sure that interoperability is make it simple. And SMEs, I think when we talk about globalization, before COVID, what we see globalization is about large companies. We have many global corporates all over the world. However, we believe the true globalization lays on the SMEs. So the SMEs can trade globally. SMEs can receive global travelers. That's what truly globalization. So from that part, so we have introduced several services, not going to advertise down here, but just trying to see that we can work together truly to digitize SMEs for that. So these are the few things Ant is working on, and hopefully we can work all close together with all of the payment value chain to truly to transform to inclusive interoperability and simplicity to make the whole economy going digital. Thank you.
All right, I will come back to that. I want to ask you also how you see achieving that looking forward to the future. But we'll pause that for now. I think we have looked at connecting from a global and how about I zoom into a Thailand point of view. As Kun Orapong, you're here with SCB, local bank, big bank right here. How you see some of the trends in payments? What are some of the innovations that you have seen locally and what you have been working with?
Before talking about where we're going, let me set the context of where we are. Right? If you look Thailand today, we are number one in mobile payment in the world. Right? I Googled this morning and asked how many accounts, mobile accounts we have in Thailand. At the end of last year, we had 96.7 million accounts out of 60 million people. Actually less than 60 million people. Right? So for us, at this point, payment is a boring subject. It has become a commodity. Right? We take it for granted. Right? I have not been in any branch, any bank branch for the longest time. Can't even remember when the last time I went to a branch. Right? And the fact that we have more accounts than the number of users means that it has become truly commodity. I have K-Bank app on my mobile, right? as well as SCB app. Right? So everyone because the nature that is digital, loyalty, the way we know it, disappear. Right? If my app doesn't work, I switch to use K-Bank app. Right? And vice versa. Right? So, but to get here, right, you have to look back 3 or 4 years, like Kun Tommy said, right? 3 or 4 years ago, we still walk into a branch, we still used ATM, right? But the pace that where we are today and the feeling that all of this has become commodity, right? It just shows the pace of innovation, right? But to sit here today and think about it, right? You don't even realize it, that we have have a lot of innovation in this area. Right? The question is, so what's next? Right? From a local bank, right, we see this in 2 layers. One is the fundamental layer that enable reliable payment. I think many banks today are facing issues with fraud. Right? If you read the UN report early this month, right, there was a report that there's human trafficking in our area, 120,000 people in Myanmar, 100,000 people in Cambodia who got trafficked to work in call center, right? And the amount of fraud per year is in multi-billion US dollar. Right? So at the fundamental level, we are dealing with a big disruptor, right? Criminal disruptor, right? Who has a lot of resources, right? $billions of business, hundreds of thousands of people working on this, right? So for us, one area of innovation that we're searching is how can we fight this, right? Because now we not just fight normal criminal, right? We're fighting someone who's a lot deeper technically than us. I can tell long story on this, right? We went through so many evolution of trying to fight this. Every time we do something, it saves us for a week, right? Within a week, something else come up. That's a cycle that we have seen, right? So that's one area. If you ask where we need innovation, that's one, right? Second one is a layer above payment, because payment has become commodity service, but the data on payment is very valuable. Easier to say than done. Right now, on a good day at our bank, we saw 65 million transactions on our mainframe in one day. A lot of data. Right? How can we make use of this data? And data is like disposable goods. If I have it, if I don't use it now, tomorrow it's no longer relevant. Right? So how can I process 65 million transactions and make sense of it such that I can take action? Right? That's the area of innovation which AI will come in to play in that area. Right? And thirdly, the area that Kunal talked about, the corporate payment, right? Cross-border payment. I think there's still a lot of rooms using stablecoin and also other digital currency like XRP and all of that, right? But ultimately, since I'm at BOT here today, right, things that I'm waiting and things that I'm hoping is CBDC, central bank digital currency. If you look at all the problem I have today on fraud, right? What if all of digital money is traceable? Right? What will be incentive for someone to commit fraud if you can't take money out of the system? I truly believe CBDC will be the innovation that will enable that, and to the scale beyond what we can imagine today. If you look evolution of prompt pay, right? Credit to Kun Mancha and BOT, right? Once prompt pay happened, payment adoption accelerate to the point where we are today. What I believe is once CBDC happen, the next wave of innovation will happen much greater than what we have seen. So as I'm at BOT, every time I lobby for this, right? So please make the upstream money to be digital, then I think we will see a lot more things to come.
Pause there because I think I want to touch upon that again on what other things you see we should do going in to the future. But I think one underlying theme everybody's talking about is just getting also the basics right. I think we're kind of there, but not there perfectly. How do we make it even more simple and even more secure? I'm supposed to also be a speaker additional to my moderator role, but I'll add in one thing. I think on top of the layer, for examples, on simplicity, I mean, as everybody has adopted payments, how do you make payments much easier? We have Line as a messenger, right? And usually you're asking your friends about, hey, pay me back for lunch, pay me for this, for that. It's always there. It starts there, and then you have to do the transactions outside later. Can be very simplistic things, not so much AI, but can you try to understand that message and says, oh, Mr. A wants the lunch repaid, and just make that straight up a deep link so they can do that payment right away, just to simplify experience. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot in terms of what we call embedded payments, just simplifying that transaction, understanding the context, and really putting that payment in a way that the users don't have to worry about the payment, just wants to do what they want to do, which is a segue into our second part. I want to ask everybody about what use cases do we see. I think the theme for this week is AI, machine learning, all that buzzwords we hear all the time. But how are some of these working in the payment industry? So I'll jump into Ant first, and Sherry, you, if you can share a couple things, or you have a couple showcases on your side.
Thank you. I think if there's one hot word this year, is AI. Everybody's talk about the AI. So if you talk about the AI, it's definitely about large data scaling modeling. So from this, Ant has been using, because we are running one of the largest consumer-facing app. So we have been using a lot of to the consumer part, such as smart recommendations. Today, if you have an Alipay app, you open up. So we have been showing this to many of our partners. So we all look different things. So you might be wondering why we are looking at different things. It's all based on your profiles, behaviors, what are your preferences. And then we have been spending years of this trying to make sure that our customers are very happy. Then post-COVID, especially during COVID, we suddenly realized many of our merchants, our partners, also need digitization. If we want to build the future of digitization, we not only consumer knows, we also our business partners need that. So we have developed one of the product. I'm going to show it. Can we have the clip?
I think there's a clip, short clip from Ant.
Yeah. So
Hello,
while
everyone.
we're waiting for
We're
the
excited
clip,
to announce the launch of Alipay Plus Docs AI for our document center. From now on, there's no need for you to go through documents on your own. Simply ask any Alipay Plus related question to a chatbot, and Docs AI will help you out. By using Docs AI, you can unlock these superpowers. Rapid positioning helps you quickly locate target content within a vast array of complex documents. Simply ask a question, and it will retrieve relevant content related to your query. Cross-domain summarization offers content summarization across various products and domains, eliminating the need for you to spend time searching and summarizing relevant information yourself. Logical reasoning uses document content to draw logical conclusions and generate insights, acting as an additional thinking partner to assist you. Creating and fabricating, drawing from document content, Docs AI generates customized code tailored to your needs based on prompt scenarios. Self-evolution. Through a feedback loop involving question-answer data and user feedback, Docs AI continuously learns autonomously and evolves iteratively. Alipay Plus Docs AI, your cutting-edge AI-powered virtual assistant. Now, please go and experience it right away.
Yeah, this is just a short clip. We just want to show that we are moving from only the consumer part of the AI to more of the partner-generated AI. For this is one of the showcases we want to do. Another part is, of course, we do the Zolos, which is our product, is for the facial recognitions, all of this. One of the things I would like to ask, since I'm taking this advantage, I think there's more user cases that need to work together with the industry, particularly on the business and the partner sides. As we said, we have a lot of data for the consumer part to do the AI, but for the business parts, actually this is something we felt not enough information. So we would love to work with the industry to do more on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And you touch upon businesses and merchants. So I'm going to throw it your way, Krishnan, with Stripe. I know you're also working with a lot of merchants and businesses. So what you see as some of the use cases with technology you're doing on that side. And if you also touch upon, I think as Orapong talked about, there's a lot of fraud, a lot of risks. One of the biggest use case of machine learning models is on that area. So you can also touch upon that.
Absolutely. So I think Stripe is relatively unique, I think, among payment processors at least, in that we tend to focus on support SMEs as much as we support enterprises, right? So we tend to work with companies when they are very young and we grow with them. And most of our sort of largest commercial successes have been with platforms when they were two-person teams in garages, right? So now SMEs, as all of you know, bring unique challenges, right, in terms of onboarding, for example, right? So it's very easy to do business with large enterprises, right? They're very well known. You have data around them. There's a lot of credit data. There's industry data. There's brand data. So it's much easier just to understand the needs of an enterprise and sign them on. Much harder to do when you're an SME who is a small retailer sitting at a mom and pop shop that's trying to go online for the first time. So Stripe has always been kind of unique in that we've always worked with an SME first perspective for how we build products. And AI has been tremendously helpful as an underlying infrastructure element for us across the full life cycle of how we deal with SMEs, right? So starting with onboarding, right, which is when you sign up an SME, how do you verify them and how do you make sure that they're not a fraudulent merchant, right? And so we have some standard patterns, and you sort of move from sort of logical check-based models to AI-based inference models that are basically better at predicting fraud, right? So you want to prevent fraud as early as you can in the life cycle. So that's one stage of the process. The second stage of the process is transaction monitoring, right? So obviously, again, sort of the vectors of fraud with increased sort of globalization and digitization, I think has also come increased vectors of fraud, right? So the more money is sort of moving more seamlessly cross-border, a lot of the elements of attack are also moving cross-border, right? So we are seeing pretty unique forms of fraud that have come up in the past 2 years. Certainly Visa, I know has seen a lot of this as well, around things like card enumeration attacks and fraud level attacks, multi-level marketing attacks, attacks that basically take advantage of regulations being different across different markets, where it will be valid in one market to do something but not in another, and so forth. And so the idea that historical methods of checking for these conditions actually have failed, are very hard to keep up with rules. So rule-based systems are going to be hard systems to solve this problem. AI is essentially the heart of AI, allows us to look at ambiguous data sets and actually solve this in a much better way. Huge amount of, we actually have our own product called Radar that does fraud detection, but actually we are starting to use AI incrementally to do a lot more of these more sophisticated, what I'll call edge cases, right? And then finally on the last part, which is post-transaction, we are also starting to really, and this is kind of the user-first, consumer-first perspective. We want to preactively start figuring out when you have disputes that are likely to arise. We want to start doing proactive refunds. So these are some very interesting ideas that we are experimenting and piloting with. And the idea is to basically say that if you know there's a dispute that's going to come down the line, and it's going to cost X dollars and so much amount of pain across 3 different parties that have to together collaborate, can we just get in front of this already and just make it consumer friendly? And so we're working on a bunch of different dimensions of experience. One, obviously, the goal is to limit fraud. You can never eliminate it, but I think the rate of fraud increases at least as much as the rate of internet commerce growth, and so we just have to find a way to get better at it, while also trying to find better experiences for both consumers as well as merchants.
Quite a few things. Obviously, we talk about fraud quite a bit. I want to jump to Visa, who probably globally has done one of the most work around fraud and risk analytics and some of those models. So can you expand among that and other AI use cases?
So I'll build on what Krishnan said and Orapong also said, and an adage based on my 8-year-old son who loves Spider-Man. With big data comes big responsibility, right? So for a company like ours, we partner with close to 15 million institutions around the world, process close to $270 trillion of transactions across 100 million merchants. So the data sets that we have to govern and look at is huge. And when we started talking about AI, Visa invested with AI in 1993 in our fraud and security tools. And it has shown tremendous success in terms of savings. But the challenge still remains. What I thought I'd do is, taking a cue from Sherry, I'll show you a bit of a clip on how we sort of integrate AI with VisaNet. VisaNet is basically our data set and data products box, where through all the transactions go through. So if you can cue the video, please, then we can come back.
When a customer taps a card or pays online, they expect it to work without a hitch. Hassles like false declines and fraudulent transactions can lead to lost sales and customers who don't come back. Payments should be easy. Security to protect payments, however, is anything but. Across the world, hackers are continuously innovating and using advanced tools to exploit and compromise consumer data, such as account numbers and security codes. But every second, Visa Security and AI wage a complex battle to protect every transaction that flows through our network, keeping fraud rates at historic lows despite a rise in cybercrime. Let's take a closer look. Visa pioneered the use of AI to help protect payments nearly 30 years ago and has invested in infrastructure and cutting-edge technology to predict risk, protect transactions, and keep consumer data under lock and key. Billions of transactions fuel our network with information, making Visa AI smarter and smarter as time goes by. Because that's how AI works. The longer it's been around, the more it knows, and the better it becomes. In the split second it takes to switch from authorizing to approved, Visa AI uses advanced algorithms and more than 500 data factors to score the riskiness of every transaction, separating good ones from bad ones. Our machine learning models can identify sophisticated attack patterns, while Visa's global security team monitors, scans, and checks for suspicious activity 24/7, 365, alerting financial institutions and merchants before hackers even get a chance to commit fraud. And if a bank or credit union experiences a service outage, Visa can step in on their behalf, using deep learning to predict how the participating bank might have responded.
So we've cut it short. So there are three basic products that exist today. That's stand-in processing. So imagine a world, if a bank system is down, we can kick in to ensure payments doesn't fall through, doesn't cause customer disruption. The other is Visa Advanced Authorization, where we can predict if an authorization is a false positive or is supposed to be a decline. We can send you a score and you can decline it on behalf of. And Visa Consumer Authentication Services, which can be across all networks, because we spoke about interoperability. As a client, you also don't want to work just thinking about one type of payment product or payment network, so we can do on behalf of. So when you bring all of that together, AI and technology will always be the foundational layer and the technology behind it, but the use cases will start and should start in the fraud and risk space, and then we build it from there.
No, quite a bit from there, and definitely, I mean, just to put into use, I think Pio, I mean, you opened it up with fraud, right? And I think in the card-based industry, there's a lot of these analytic models that is done as the transaction is being authorized. So you can kind of stop, sometimes you get decline on your card transaction. Like, okay, so the card transaction didn't go because there's some score that says, hey, that looks like something that you wouldn't do. In our real-time payment world, that would just have gone and we have to deal with it later because we haven't put that up. How do you see some of these new technologies coming to help? And what are some of the things you're working on? As you said, you work on something, the bad guys come up with something else, or maybe even other use cases you're looking around.
We're also implementing AI to detect credit card fraud in our bank. Right? But credit card is different. You have time to deal with it. Right? Mobile fraud is very fast and slow. We have cases where we interview customer, and customers spend 6 hours with the person who commit the fraud, talking to the person for 6 hours. So I think that's beyond AI. I think that's, I don't know what to call that, right? But it's social engineering. Right? The world of fraud today is so complicated, and we trace once a transaction happened, in less than 3 minutes, the money is gone, even if we can detect it. Right? And by the fact that because we have many banks, right? It jumped through ITMX to multiple banks, right? And in the 3 minutes period, nothing can be done. Right? So it's not just AI. Right? If you're going to tackle fraud, it's a lot more complex problem. The execution capabilities of the bank, of the telcos, need to be there. Right? And so the problem that we have seen in the past is not what we're seeing now. Right? That's why I said I have a lot of questions. I don't have answers. I see a lot of problems that I'm facing every day. Right? But there is still a lot of challenges that we need to go through.
We have time, so not often I have time, so I can throw around. So I'm going to start going off script a bit. We talk about AI a lot, and it's all the basics. How do we get it safe and secure? But I'm just going to throw around. Like the word of today is generative AI. Right? We have used ChatGPT. There's all these new things. If any of you can kind of see what kind of use cases are people using that for in your businesses, or what are you kind of planning to use some of these new technologies in your businesses, or you see partners or industries around you? And I'm pretty open if anybody can kind of chime in. I'm looking at you a lot, Kunal. So,
okay. What did Spider-Man say? Okay, so I think the Gen AI leapfrog is a leapfrog, and the leap is gonna get even faster and longer. The way we're looking at it, and we're seeing the industry look at it, is right now a little bit internal, right? How do we improve productivity given the technology? How do we better understand it? How do we better use it? So I think the first leap of faith with Gen AI, my prediction, not Visa, mine, just disclaimer, is going to be around productivity and how we improve productivity of employees to just work faster, better. And we're seeing the front-end use cases of that with, say, consumer applications, chatbots, personal financial management, better advice, faster advice, so RMs can be better at their jobs because information comes faster and in real time. I think the real question for me is contextual hyper-personalization. And if the example I'll use, which happens a lot, unless Facebook reminds me, is a friend's birthday. And based on the friend's birthday, when is it, what sort of item would he or she like, and where can I buy it, and will I get a good offer with it? And that whole journey, if it's curated and it comes to me as a consumer, I think that could be a potential out there use case. Similarly, on the merchant side, I think there are tremendous use cases when you think about merchant loyalty, merchant value-added services, how to route transactions from one place to another. On the settlement side, I think there's some use cases over there as well.
Anybody else, please? Kunal.
I just finished a world tour on AI. Our bank set up questions that everyone in our bank believes that AI is very important. Right? But the questions that we seek answer was, one, is it now? Right? Given the current development, should the bank take the stance that we need to jump all in? Or should we start piloting? Or should we sit and wait? Right? So I visit all of the major players in here, including names that you mentioned. Right? Our conclusion is that in the future, it will make big impact, but not now. And given the current stage, it's not something that worth for us to make a big jump onto it. Right? So we will start some small pilots. Right? We have a team under Dr. Charlie play a lot with this, right? But we don't look at it as something that will make big impact soon. But it is something that we keep in view. Right? We build experiences, but we don't have a big plan. And another reason why we make that decision, we profile our mobile user. Right? More than 99% of our mobile user come in and only use 3 functions. Make payment, transfer money, check balance. And the total time spent per transaction is less than 40 seconds. So it doesn't matter you build personalization, you build all kind of bell and whistle on your application. Reality, at least at this point, it's proven that customers don't pay attention. 99% of our customers don't pay attention. And that's why I totally agree, the world will change. Right? AI will play a very important role. But our assessment as of today, which could change, is that it's not now.
That's quite interesting because I know it's something we talk about a lot, but haven't seen any kind of really graspable use cases, at least on the retail front. Well, at least generative AI, right, as a new. Anybody want to fill in with anything else, Sherry?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think one of the advantages for fintech, especially app-based payment, so we actually do implement quite a lot of AI-generated informations to communicate it smartly with our consumers. One of the things we realize clearly the consumer, their attention span is very short. So it's impossible, they're moving. So sometimes I was joking, it's so hard to read a book now because I can spend hours on the short videos, but you probably difficult to read 2 pages. So because of that, so we have to make sure that what we recommended to them is very targeted. So one of the things is that we have implemented the AI-generated informations to interact with them to find the best tourism-related informations. So I don't know how about you. So I want to take my 2 kids to Egypt in November. So I have to study every site to find the right hotel, right trip. It was a full-time job almost. So that is something we came up to saying that since we're in the cross-border tourism business, what can we do? So one of the things is definitely to have the AI-generated information, to embed it, and to have this. And then together is easier to close the circle with the payment. I think payment is the industry have one of the most data. Once upon a time, as many years working for tourism industry, I realized tourism has very limited data because it's something you probably travel once a year. Maybe you don't have to travel the last 3 years with COVID. However, payment has a lot of information. So that's what I, in the very beginning, saying that collaboratively we're working together with those data as we can better serving our consumers, particularly in the cross-border scenarios is the tourists, to generate information, to have a short time in their short time span to find the right product and services. So that's what we are trying to do, and we are hoping to work together for this. Thank you.
So jumping into our last topic, which is looking at the challenges going ahead and some of the new landscape if we look into the future, right? I'll give one example though. Kunal, you might not remember, he used to be my ex-boss, but I think when we were working together, we looked at transactions on the mobile banking app and said, it can't be that difficult to predict what transaction the customer wants to do next. Not very inspired by much. I mean, when you call a ride, it kind of predicts where you're going. So same concept. Hey, let's run a model. And yes, you ran the model. About 80% of the time, you can predict that next transaction because we used to always kind of do the same repeated transaction. Look at time of the day of the month, the day of the week. It's pretty easy. And we put that up really quickly. And within a week or so, I was getting great complaints from the call center saying, how do you know I'm going to do this with this person? It's like, it's a privacy issue. It's not a technology issue. So people don't sometimes feel private on who they're about to do a transaction to. So, I mean, if you have special friends and all that you don't want people to see why is that transaction popping up on the front page of my mobile app once I open it. And I'm like, damn, did not think about it that way. And that feature does not exist anymore in the app, but I was quite proud putting that up. But I think that's a leeway into actually, the science is actually pretty easy sometimes. But going forward, I think it's more of the other different challenges coming in, whether it's ethics, whether it's privacy and all that with all the new technologies we have. So, I mean, jumping to our last part, And again, I always pick you, Kunal. We're see some of the challenge first before I also add in what are the kind of big trends that you're already working on.
Sure. By the way, that example you laid in with lots of conviction on the app.
I was proud of it.
I think just building on your point, the governance structure, especially around as we think about AI and generative AI, is absolutely crucial. When you think about the ethics around it, the different use cases, because the inputs, every time whatever you input, the machine's learning and giving an output. You change your input, even for the same subject, you'll get a different output. And how do you sort of think about biases that go in and biases that come out, and what is that used for? Human beings have been known since we exist about our power of creativity. And if that power of creativity is lock stock given to the technology, how do we sort of think about intellectual property? Like who thought of that? I'm using it and adapting it, is that my intellectual property, or someone else who gave that input and the derived output came out from there? I think there are definite needs for central banks, for our own institutions to think about how do we look at governance structures and rules and ethics around this. The other one is around, essentially, it's still a black box, right? What goes in terms of data and how that's synthesized, because it's learned and throwing a data out, that's also a black box. So until that, we're comfortable with that and we know the boundaries that we need to operate in and how we use that, I think we'll still be in a sort of a space of staying close to it, using it, but being very careful how we sort of use it in terms of mass scale. But on the positive side, right? One of the things we look at in terms of how we think about the future is by way of collaboration. The future best predicted is the future one we create together. So when we apply that lens, like a lot of companies over here, we have something called as an accelerator program. On the accelerator program, we work with early stage startups on how we can solve for big problems that sometimes get lost in what we call as like BAU, because there's so much stuff going on for all of us. So things around small and medium enterprise enablement still requires a lot of work. We've got great companies that already administer that, but there's still so much out there whether they can't accept payments. There's no integrated loyalty platforms that they can go to drive consumers to them and how they pay their suppliers, which led to embedded finance. There's the construction vertical, for example, is laden with frictions, even from a workflow perspective, forget payments. The third one that we looked at was the whole concept of stable coins and digital currencies. There's lots of merchants that we have seen who want to transition, and is there a way to transition between Web 3 and Web 2 and back? And how do you make that journey sort of seamless for them? And these were some of the three ones. I think the fourth one is around biometrics. There's a lot of work we're doing. I know Anne's doing a lot of work in that space, and I'm sure there are ways for us to collaborate and just to ensure the right of how someone chooses to pay and accept is left on how they want to do it and not underlying pressures to do it.
And Lee, we'll jump to Stripe. How are you seeing kind of the future going forward? And what are some of the overlying themes that you think we want to touch upon or are focusing on?
Sure. I'll stick to sort of the payment space a little bit. I think so RTP as real-time payment systems, I think is, clearly originated in APAC, and I think it's one of the biggest contributions to the financial ecosystem. There's payments, I think now in APAC is at least 10 times more advanced than payments globally. And I think PromptPay certainly, is equally sort of interesting, right, in terms of the evolution of, right. So I think as was shared earlier today, I think it is fundamentally changing. It's become a utility. So RTPS changes like the mechanics of money movement in a very simple way across core use cases, consumer to consumer, consumer to business, business to business. It doesn't really matter, right? You just have a very simple utility, a method to move money And then you have a bunch of other use cases on risk vectors that sit on top, so you have to build for those, right? For us, I think we've been looking at this with a slightly different lens, and I think that really has to do with how do you package all of this, right? Like, because I think money movement is a utility, right? It's not a solution, and so we've been focused very sort of simply on like what are the needs of users, right? And so usually their needs build a lot on top of the utility of moving money from point A to point B. And so really thinking through kind of a lot of the opportunities for innovation, I think, sit in that space of how do you build on top of these new rails that are so much better than anything that existed before? What is the role of all the different players in the ecosystem? Are these going to be open ecosystems where you can allow third parties to innovate, right? Like there's just a bunch of open questions here, but I think a ton of opportunity as well for like the essential ecosystem to participate in, right?
I'll leave it back to you, Sherry, because you were talking a lot earlier about interoperability and how we use that to get really inclusivity across borders, not just within borders.
Yep. Well, I think, again, just as I said, each of the region actually developing differently. Some are more on the QR basis. If you go to China, QR is no longer just for payment. It's a lot of times scan, order, pay is almost like a standard. You go to even for the retail, and you look at the tea or coffee, you have no idea where it come from, what's the story. You scan the QR, you got the whole story, the videos behind. So QR is no longer, as I said, is just payment for that. But when you go to Europe, it's open banking. And go to US, it's card. So how to make sure it's interoperable? You need, actually, we all work together. So we introduced the Alipay Plus trying to tackle these challenges. But one of the things is when we work on this, of course, it's all about data privacy, data security. Another very important is data ownership. I think this is probably we haven't touched much about this. I still remember that I had a conversation when I in KL. I met with Nando's, the fried chicken chains. So the owner told me, he said, last 3 years I was so much dependent on, because COVID is all about food delivery. Therefore, I lost who are my customer. Where are they? What do they do? What is their behavior? So I have no product innovations. So when I heard this, I realized that data ownership is one of the actually the challenge in the future for the AI, because AI machine learning is all about data. So from that, again, that as one of the payment facilitator, so we are looking at introduce a mini program, for instance. So one of the things when I talk about mini program, they all wonder what's that. So I explain to them one thing. I think data belong to you. That's how I explain to my merchants. So again, when we talk about interoperability, we also need to help the SMEs to be interoperable. That's the true globalization. So for the SME go digital, one of the key things is the data ownership. That's what I would like to see. Besides all of the securities, all the privacies, where there are a lot of technology that tackle that. We have quite a privacy computing system in place, etc. We're more and more working with bank to make sure that we can work as an ecosystem to tackle this. But the ownership of the data, I think this is something need to have a further discussions in the industry. Thank you.
No, I think data is a big one. I want to jump to you next about data, or how we set up data to be well utilized, or also how we protect data, ownership of data from the bank's clients, the bank's business partners. Before I get there, touch upon, you're like, is it QR? Is it tap? Or do I just walk in the store and walk out and it knows who I am and it will just charge? It's totally embedded. I'm just looking at Visa. You have like a roadmap on how kind of Globe is going to figure out what is that payment interaction, or is it just going to not be an interaction? It's at some point going to be completely embedded. Do you have any viewpoints on that?
I think it's pretty much already embedded in some shapes or form, right? And it is absolutely fine from our perspective that irrespective of how you pay, the choice is yours on how you pay. And you're not forced into a transaction one way or the other. So going back to interoperability, going back to consumer choice, merchant choice, if those fundamentals are there, let the individual paying or who's receiving the funds decide how they want to do it. And we'll make sure as a network, together in the ecosystem, all that are available.
Great. And back to you, Kun Orapong. So, I mean, what are some of these bigger trends or challenges you're working on, talking about all this AI and data technology? And if you want to plug CBDC again, please do. So,
for us, immediate priority is actually back to basic. If you look at the volume growth that we have seen year to year, it comes with problem. Right? Service reliability, integrity of services. So this year, our priority is to get this done right. Right? We actually aim high. We aim 0 incident on payment. Right? Everything needs to be correct. Because there's a lot of hidden cost behind it if it is not correct. Cost of call center, customer dissatisfaction, and so on. Right? So that's my top priority. In terms of AI, as I shared early on, we believe it will make a big impact, but not today. So for us, we're preparing the infrastructure. For example, customer data. Right? Today, if you look in any big bank, there's so multiple instances of customer data. Right? My call center used Salesforce. I have Customer Master. My call bank has Customer Master. My loan origination system, same thing, on and on, right? If one day you believe that data will drive the organization, how could you work in this kind of environment, right? Where you don't have a single fact. You're talking about one customer, this customer appear in 10 different places. And better yet, the way we operate today, we organize by product, right? We have mortgage, we have auto loan, we have consumer loan, right? But customer is a customer, right? If your organization don't have the capability to see the customer on who he or she is, right? How could AI contribute to the productivity improvement of the insights? So that's why I said for us, priority right now is the basic, right? Get the architecture of the bank to be correct, to be ready. Data is clean, right? And transaction is 100% with integrity. In terms of moving forward, right, we spending a lot of resources on how to use the data, right? Machine learning, right? We believe that in the near future, bank will be competing on who has better brains, right? And we want to make sure that by the time come, our bank has the best brain. So that's what we're investing in, right? But this is also an interesting one. We have very good machine learning that we score customer A, B, C, and so on, right? But when the crisis hit, all of those change. People that we believe that are type A customer suddenly is no longer type A customer, right? Which raises a question, right? How sustainable is this data-driven solution? Because data, as I said early on, is a disposable goods. It has a shelf life. If surrounding change, if the data is with you for too long, it's no longer relevant. So it's something that we are still trying to experiment, try to understand how to deal with it. But I have one pilot that might be of interest to many of you. Today we do a lot of surveys, customer surveys, employee surveys, right? And people who analyze the data and come back with the recommendation sometimes have a lot of biases, right? Intentionally or unintentionally. Now we're piloting that from now on. When we do a survey, we will use ChatGPT to read the survey and summarize the finding to remove the bias. So I encourage you to try that. Might be quite interesting to see.
Yeah, that's your other use case of ChatGPT you're coming up with. So I think today we're able to kind of look at the broad view, look at some of the upcoming new technologies and a lot of the use cases. And as Kun Orapong brought it back, I mean, one of the key things is also making sure everyone said simple, secure, and robust, getting the basics right. For Thailand, making sure you can still do your transfers on 4 p.m. on the 1st and the 16th on Hoi Ok, and the lottery comes out, right? That's the death period for Thai banks, right? So hopefully that's achieved, but I think as all our distinguished speaker has opened up, there's quite a lot of things that are happening, and I think payments as a commodity as it is will really become one part of our lives and embedded right deeply into everything we do. So please give another round of applause for our 4 distinguished speakers, and great to have you guys today tonight.